So speak life, when the sun won't shine and you don't know why. Look into the eyes of the broken hearted, watch them come alive as soon as you speak hope, you speak love, you speak life.
Welcome to Dealing with Life. This is a show that features people who have gone through serious issues or struggles and found victory, and also found a deepened faith through the process. The goal is for you to be inspired and find hope, to understand that there are people all over that go through things. You are not alone, and also that Jesus offers unconditional peace. Hi, I'm Tom Baker, author of One Dog's Faith, a book about life, trust, and worry through the eyes of a dog. With me in the studio today is a very special person. I've known him for a long, long time. Multi-Dove award-winning, Grammy-nominated composer, world-class guitarist, 30 number one hits with your name on them, Travis Wyrick.
That's a long name tag right there. It's hard to fit on a shirt when it's that much.
Well, yeah, you let it, you roll it down. It's like a
window
like a
tat,
shade,
like a sleeveless, like a tattoo.
So glad to have you here.
Thank you for having me. Thank you so much.
You are an incredible musician, and turned into an engineer, producer. Tell me how this all started.
You know, being in a band back in the day, I guess being a guitar player, you have a little heads up. You have a bass and treble knob and pedals and, all that. So I think just as a guitar player in general, engineering is something you kind of have to do anyway. So I was always trying to figure out why this amp sounded better than this, why this guitar sounds better. And actually early on, back in the analog days, I saved and bought a 4-track recorder as soon as I got a guitar. And just immediately started recording like an acoustic guitar, and then I do a couple of guitar solos over it in melody and harmonies and all this kind of stuff. So I think the engineering was probably just a mistake from being an obsessive compulsive guitar player songwriter. So
that makes sense.
Yeah.
That makes sense. So you were in a touring band.
Correct.
You were in Sage. Mm-hmm. And tell me a little bit about Sage.
We were a high school band that just kept on grinding and trucking. And so as soon as we graduated high school, we started touring, local, regional, I guess national. We'd go up to Michigan, Alabama, Florida, North, South Carolina, doing it full time. I mean, it was one of those as soon as we got out of high school.
You were in it to win it.
Yeah. I mean, and at that time, you got to remember, no internet, no competition.
Okay.
You went to go see bands or you went to go see a movie. I mean, you didn't have, so, I mean, the day, there's rock clubs were huge, dance clubs were huge. So, we were touring all over, full-time musician.
Man.
Just all about it.
Living the dream.
Yes.
So what was the mental goal of that?
We wanted to be rock stars.
Yes.
I mean, and back then, you would go see a Van Halen or, all these amazing bands, and you would just, I mean, to me, I would just watch these bands in awe. And I would be like, that, Civic Coliseum, that's where bands went back then. We didn't have Thompson Bowling and all these other great venues that have come around. And so I would watch these and just almost in tears, wanting to be on that stage so bad.
Yeah.
And it was the love of music, I guess the love of showmanship and the love of the arts that made me want to do that. So it was just that constant battle of, well, this is what you do to get there. You've got to go beat the streets. You've got to hit all these bars, all these clubs. And we were relentless. I mean, it was Vic Logan on drums and Doug Schock on vocals for the majority of it. We had a few different bass players over the years, but the three of us from day one. I mean, we were the grinders.
And still best of friends, which is so
absolutely.
Cool. And the sound was amazing. I was a big fan.
It was fun. We had a good time.
Now, what was the culmination? What was I know that you played Thompson Bowling. What was the biggest thing?
I would say for me, Thompson Bowling with Bon Jovi is probably on paper the biggest.
Okay.
Because of the size, and it was Bon Jovi in his glory days, but
you opened for them.
Correct. Okay. 94. But bigger than that was Civic Coliseum with Bad Company. sold out.
Right.
Yeah,
right.
and so to me, that was the venue that I saw Metallica, Motley Crue, Van Halen,
yeah.
Tesla, Guns N' Roses. Didn't know who Guns N' Roses were. Some band opened for Motley Crue called Guns N' Roses. So to me, I think watching rock and roll grow up in that building and to be on that stage, I'll never forget. I mean, I literally almost cried just, grinding that first chord. Back then you just played that first chord and,
Yeah. The place
at that point I was
lights
like, wow, I'm done. I can die now. So
Wow.
that venue meant more. That would have been to me and maybe to the band. If you ask them, that was probably the biggest. Now, Bon Jovi was pretty amazing. And Bon Jovi was a saint because usually when you're the opening act, you don't get to use anything. Here's a 4 foot by 3 foot square. If you step out of that, you will be hit with a cane.
Out of my way, boy.
Bon Jovi, after sound check and this enormous stage with all these things going on. So I just walked over to the sound guy, submissive little opening act.
Sure.
Okay, so where can we not stand? He just looked at me and said, excuse me? I said, where are we not allowed to go? He's like, you can go anywhere you want. He said, John Bon Jovi's not afraid of you. And I just thought, I was like, oh my gosh, you're right. He is John Bon. Little old Sage is not. And he let us, it was the coolest thing. A lot of we got to talk to him that night. Probably one of the greatest rock stars we met during that whole episode.
Okay.
Just a great human being.
So in that process, doors open left and right?
Yes. Well, if you put it to a timeline, it makes sense. And I've told this story a lot. We were actually in negotiations with Sony Records, Marnie Smith. Now, in rock and roll and in the music industry in general, in those days, signing a deal was instant millionaire status. I mean, big money.
Sure.
Everybody gets a couple $100,000. You get a $4 million budget and all, things. It's like cashing in the ultimate stock.
Right. You moved to Beverly Hills.
Correct. Yeah. It's obviously different now. So back then, we'd been doing it for a while and it was a grind and I still loved the music and I loved the guys and I loved what we were doing. My heart was fading a little bit because of just the monotony and how long, just all of those parts. But at that point, we were heavy in negotiations. I think we were finally getting better performers. We were getting better as songwriters and we were just developing,
you were becoming pros.
Correct. Yeah. So I think at that point we were in negotiations and I'll never forget. I mean, I can remember these phone calls to Sony Records and stuff. And hey, they love this song. They love this song. They don't like this direction, development side.
Yeah.
And a couple of times she's like, okay, great. Well, I'll call you Monday. We're going up to Seattle this weekend. And, a couple of those. And then after about a month or two, she goes, hey man, it's over. I was like, what? She's like,
no.
There's this thing going on in Seattle. We don't know. We don't understand it. We don't get it. But it's huge. It's a movement. We can't give away our bands. Their big band, I think, was Whitesnake, which was huge at the time.
Yeah.
Steve I was still in the band and stuff. She said, we can't give rock records away. So they had a company policy, no signing rock bands until they figure out what's going on in Seattle. So
and
we were
right there on the table.
We're just like, And she said, so I said, well, I'll call you. She goes, no. You're not, it's over. And it was like, boom, right there. But there was a piece about it because my heart had grown soft to the whole fight. It had been 14 years, I think, if you do the math from the beginning.
And you include the smoke, and you include the bars, and you include the
it's a beatdown. My back, is just destroyed from load in, load out, playing in rock and roll boots for, we would play 4 45-minute sets. I mean, that's brutal.
That's running and gunning, especially
in girls' boots. That's so difficult.
And very, very tight leather pants.
Yes.
Okay.
It's so different. So much harder than it looks.
So, do you consider that a God going, hang on?
No question.
This is not where I really need you.
At the time, and at that time, I would even say, I don't know if I was saved. I think being in the Bible Belt, we go to church here. It's kind of dangerous because everyone goes to church in the Bible Belt. Mm-hmm. It doesn't mean you're saved. It means you go to church.
You show up.
It's a social event.
Yeah.
A lot of my friends, they live in California stuff. They don't go to church if they're not saved. You go to church if you're a Christian and a follower of Christ. So I think I fell in that category and didn't even know it, that I attended church because my family attended church and all that. But I didn't have a relationship at all with Christ.
Okay.
My grandfather was a great pastor, a great Christian man. Didn't know much about the Bible. Thought I'd probably get in by default because,
I'm related.
Yeah, all Christians and their favorite grandsons get in. I hadn't read that part yet. So it's not in there, by the way, if anyone's wondering.
Yeah.
So at that point, I think life lesson looking back, and my wife was talking to Doug the other day, and Doug had told her, I'm so glad that it didn't work out because I'm 90 to nothing. I'm just 1,000 miles an hour.
Sure.
So I would have died or something. I'm just
that would have propelled you into the stratosphere.
Yeah,
and then
with all the excesses that were going on and all that, I just don't know how that would have worked out. So God had a plan at that point. And there was a piece about it with me of I was kind of growing. I definitely at that point wanted to have other musical ventures, and being in one band, you're in one band.
Yeah.
And so at that point, there was a little bit of, well, man, this could be, you always wondered. And my mom used to even say, how much longer are you going to stick this out? My mom was my biggest supporter. She would say, and I'd always say, I'm going to give it another year. And she said, you've been saying that for 6 years. Right. And I was like, boom, it just hit me. So this was the perfect time. I talked to the drummer first, I believe, and then I talked to the singer. And we just all said, you know what? Been a great run. No regrets. We lived, we learned, we conquered what we set out to conquer. The world just changed and we weren't there. And great. We did a final show. It was a great night. And that was the end of it. And we all kind of went our separate ways. The drummer was really wanting to get back to school. He was real close to his degree. And I didn't even know what I was going to do. I really didn't.
Right. Okay. But you had recording in you. Did you engineer or do any recording with Sage?
I did all our demos, and we did a record in Nashville. And under the circumstances, it was great. We had Scott Rouse, a great producer, great visionary. He was a great mentor. He really taught me the art of tearing a song down and, hey, are you really focusing on what's the groove, what's the pattern? What are you doing? What are they doing? He's the guy that
I'm just playing.
Yeah, I was like, no, man, I'm just trying to not mess this chord up. So he really helped me understand that pattern. It was such a blessing doing that record, but we were under such a financial time restraint. We did it in a studio that didn't do a lot of rock and roll. The engineer didn't do a lot of rock and roll.
Okay.
And we just weren't ready. So when we got the record back, it was a record. But in my head, I heard our music so different. And when it was done, they did a great job, but it just wasn't what I had visioned the songs to be as I guess the primary writer for the band. Doug would write a lot of the stuff too. But, the ones I would write, I was just like, man, that's just not what I heard them being. So after we finished the record, we were touring and, it had done well for us. I started recording. My studio gear had gotten a little more extensive and I started recording more stuff. And I remember going to our manager with Neville Shivel. Yeah. With a cassette, because that's what you did back then. You can Google
Most
cassette.
People don't even know what that means.
Google cassette. I think there's 2 S's in it. And so he popped it in, and it was a couple of the newer songs I'd been working on. He said, wow, where did y'all record this? This sounds amazing. I was like, dude, that's just me in my bedroom with my studio. And he's like, are you kidding me? So he goes over to this box, undoes the CD, pops it in. And he's like, wow, it just had heart. I think I finally learned it's not about, going to some big, massive studio with a, console longer than a car. It's about capturing the soul and the heart. And that's what, Scott Rouse had taught me. You've got to learn how to find your soul and your heart. You've got to learn to play with heart. Even a bass guitar can put a heart on it. And so being in my room, I was able to kind of learn the lessons he had taught me. So the second record we actually did, I did it myself, set up mics in a hardwood room of a house, had Vic come over with his drum set. He played to nothing but me playing an acoustic guitar in his headphones. And so we did the second record ourselves. And so that was my first real record. And we had a CD, which was insane. No local bands did CDs. So that was really when I realized,
hey,
wow, this is so much fun. Yeah. And just layering things and harmonizing and changing parts on the fly because you just wanted to.
Okay. So there's our bookmark. Mm-hmm. You saw a light at the end of the tunnel. Maybe there's something I can do with this talent.
Yeah. Well, and it was weird because to me it was a means to an end. It was, I hear music in my head. I'm going to put music on a CD.
Okay.
when the CD came out, and we did well with it. I mean, we were still touring and stuff, and all these bands started contacting me, going, "Man, we love the sound and the production of this CD. Would you record us?" And
That's
I didn't
awesome.
get it. I'm a guitar player and blah blah blah. That's not what I do. I didn't get it,
Yeah.
and eventually one of them, I was teaching guitar and stuff too, and one of the bands said, "Well, hey, why don't we just pay you whatever you charge an hour to teach guitar, but we'll just come to your studio and you can record us?" And I was like, "Well, that kind of sounds logical." And so I recorded the band, and it was a band called Nailed, and they were a great band. Scotty Hoagland, talented bunch of guys, kind of doing the Alice in Chains thing, the grunge thing,
Okay.
ironically.
Okay. But
Then-
with a Christian slant.
Oh, absolutely.
Okay.
Absolutely. Great Christian guys, great minister type music. And I wasn't a Christian at that time.
Okay.
So then another band came because they loved the Nailed record. It was Disciple.
Wow.
And they were
Wow.
like, "Man, we love what you did with Nailed. We like what you had done with your Sage stuff. Will you record us?" I was like, "What the heck?"
So word was traveling. Wow.
Yeah. So people always say you don't advertise. I'm like, well, a CD is a business card and it's flying all over the place. So you don't really have to advertise.
That's awesome. All right, so when we come back, this show is called Dealing with Life. That was all kind of cool stuff.
Yeah.
But there's a dark side to this.
Dark side.
Yes. And we will dive into that in just a minute. This is Dealing with Life. I'm Tom Baker, author of One Dog's Faith. We'll talk in a minute.
You speak life. Oh, 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 oh. You speak life. If you got pain, he's a pain taker. If you feel lost, he's a way maker.
You're listening to Dealing with Life. We're talking with Travis Wyrick.
Good evening.
Nice to have you along.
Great to be here.
If you didn't hear the first segment, Travis is a multi-Dove Award winner, Grammy-nominated composer, music producer, world-class guitarist. Man, so glad to have you here.
Thank you.
Just for the record.
Yes.
And we'll talk about marriage and whatnot later, but just for the record, you introduced my wife and me 20 years ago.
Yes. And they got married. So at one point in my life, blind dates, I was 1,000%. Then I did it again, and I went down to 500 like that. So I stopped doing it. I'm at 500.
Well, we're on the upside, and I mean, after a difficult divorce, I thought I'd never find happiness again. You introduced me to happiness. Can never thank you enough for that.
Absolutely.
So in the first segment, we were talking about your touring life. We were talking about the band Sage, which you went all halfway across the country.
Yes.
Touring with that. So it sounded kind of glamorous because you opened for Bon Jovi, you opened for Bad Company. I mean, it was going places.
It was fun. I mean, it's like camping.
It was something you love to hate.
Yes, exactly. It's exactly right.
So there's a glamorous side and there's a not so glamorous side. What did you not like about it?
I think the more it went on, I think God started to, and again, I was not a Christian during this, but God started to reveal and pull the blinders off my eyes. So a lot of these people, I jokingly called us the freak magnets because just some of the people at 4 a.m. that would like, "Hey man, where y'all going? We're Lansing, Michigan. Can I ride on your bus?" It's like, I guess.
Yeah.
You know.
Will you carry stuff?
Yeah,
Okay.
it's like, okay, are you going to steal stuff while we're asleep? But just some of I do miss the people. I'm a people person. I've never met a stranger and that kind of thing. But
Yeah.
I guess, a lot of it you would just be talking to in a lot of these rock clubs. I mean, there's a lot of dark, people that have just been there, and that's where their escape is with the drinking and all that. And so, I'm more of an interview type person. I'd rather sit there and talk to a few people. And I think after a while, just going, man, it's a lonely place. I mean, there's a lot of sadness and it's just bar life in general sometimes,
Yeah.
Not to
You can have a
hate
room
on bar
full of
life.
people and be very lonely.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Wow. So and not only loneliness, but then there's the partying.
Oh yeah. And I'm 90 to nothing. So, I always say they sell them by the case for a reason.
Well, I used to work in the bar life a long time ago. I was a DJ, and the DJ booth was always near a bar.
Oh yeah.
And I would always make friends with the bartenders, and they would always send me the reject drinks. So in that
Opportunist.
yes, in that life, I don't know how much I drank. More than a lifetime.
Well, you don't
worth
even
of-
know you're doing it in that environment. You know, a lot of people would say, "Oh, did you quit because you're a raging alcoholic?" And all. It's like, no, I quit drinking almost 20 years ago in October. I just got to a point where, and this is a line from Gran Torino, a band I got to work with. I was sick and tired of being sick and tired. I was so sick of me mentally battling. Oh, should I drink today? Should I not? Have I had to? You know, and my brain couldn't let that go. And so I would go.
Where's enough?
Yeah, and I would go, okay, so obviously it's obsessing my mind. So the thought of it, you know, my dad was an alcoholic, my uncle, my grandfather, and I can even tell you, not to get too sidetracked, but we got pregnant with our first child, and I remember waking up one day and saying, I was a Christian at this point, I know but I said, you know, my children will never see what I've seen. I didn't tell anyone. I prayed to God for the first time. Now I tried to quit a bunch on, you know, hey, let me slow down and only drink
I'll keep
light
this in
beer
check.
and
right.
watered down
I used to
margaritas.
drink stuff that I didn't like, so I wouldn't drink so much.
5-shot limit.
Right.
And I finally, you know, I used to joke, God said, yeah, let me know when you're serious. You know, I'm busy. There's a lot going on in the world with your silliness over there of monitoring your drinking. But when I prayed for God, please take this away, I can't. It's bigger than me. Especially being in the music business. I tell people, imagine if you went to work and the secretary came in and said a shot and a beer and a margarita. Hey, 9 a.m. That's what we did. We worked.
That was
in
just
bars.
part of the working
Yes.
environment.
And there was always a cooler full and everything you wanted. There was a bar tab and everything. So every day of my life, alcohol was right there being forced on me. So it's not like I was a raging alcoholic. I had just gotten to the point where it was an everyday thing for me.
Sure.
It was a part of my life.
Well, people have looked at me and said, I don't drink either. It's been 19 years for me.
Nice.
And people, well, Jesus drank wine. And I said, yeah, Jesus didn't have a problem with drinking. Jesus has a problem when you don't have your judgment.
Oh, no question.
Basically, he says, don't do anything that affects your judgment. Okay, a glass of wine, no problem. I can't do that.
Yeah. Well, and it's in your, well, it's what I tell people. It's like DNA for me, alcoholism is in my DNA. I know this for a fact. I hope my kids don't get it. My wife has zero drinking problem at all. There's don't drink, drinking problem, and alcoholic. There's a difference.
Sure.
This person doesn't have the DNA of an alcoholic. They just drink too much because they're just shutting life out.
Yeah.
This person doesn't drink at all. This person's an alcoholic. They have a physical and biological problem with alcohol.
Right.
And so,
If you break the wall,
correct.
then you're
yeah,
done.
and just know where you are. Again, my wife, glass of wine, I should half a glass of wine and it'll just sit there and I'm like, wow, that's just bizarre to me. Why would you not finish a drink?
And then order 7 more.
Yeah,
right, right.
So
what would you say? I understand where you are because you want to not cross that line. What would you say to somebody who is right there going, I know I can quit, but I don't know how?
Well, the beauty of social media is I will post my sobriety birthday, October 25th every year. Mm-hmm. And, it's cool. People, hurrah, blah, blah, blah. And then I get the IMs, instant message of, man, how'd you do it? I've been trying for years. My wife is about to leave. My kids hate me, and I'm like, hey.
It's destructive.
Yeah, and it's cool because it's a stranger from North Dakota, whoever. And God has said, hey, I'll use that. I'll use your abuse of alcohol to help, and I'll use Facebook. He'll use a rock.
Sure.
He'll do anything he wants.
Sure.
So it opens the door for me to be able to say, hey, first off, you've got to be wanting to quit, not your wife, not your mom, not your sister.
Agreed.
If the abuser doesn't want to quit,
it won't happen.
500 people can wish it upon them. They will find a way to do whatever they're going to do. So I will say, do you want to quit or do people want you to quit? Because that's a huge difference.
That's powerful.
Yeah.
Very powerful. Now, we're going to fast forward a little bit, and we'll get into your producing a little bit in a second, but I do want to say, you mentioned disciple a minute ago. And you mentioned that through the process of touring and even when you started recording, you were not a Christian. What was the turning point?
Yeah, and I say not a Christian. I was going to church, and I probably had a cross necklace and all that stuff.
Oh yeah, wore the colors.
Correct. But being in Bible Belt, East Tennessee, we just sometimes assume we're saved, and had never really had someone tell me, hey, if you don't stand up and say, I believe Jesus is the Son of Man, and he died for my sins, and I will follow him. He is the Son of God. That's the scriptural true meaning of, following Christ. Yeah. You got to have the ground zero. So I never had that moment. And so it was a Super Bowl Sunday. Funny story. Most Christians will go, oh, it's 6:25 on, I don't have the date. And here's the funny thing.
Nor do I.
It was Super Bowl Sunday, and the Buffalo Bills were playing. Okay. So that narrows it down to a 4-year window because they played 4 years in a row. Still don't know when it was. But I was at church and literally had been just turmoil in my life as far as who, what, when, where, what's my purpose, all that kind of stuff.
What is this whole thing?
And I started praying. I tell this to people all the time. I prayed to a God I didn't know. God, if you are real, expose yourself to me. Show me who you are. Because as a kind of not follower, I'm like, well, hey, if you're God, show me you're God. I wasn't being sarcastic.
Split that mountain in half.
It was reveal yourself. And I'll tell people that don't believe, I'll say, hey, if you don't believe, then this shouldn't offend you. Pray for God to show himself to you.
And mean it.
Because he will. I mean, he hears
absolutely.
it. So,
I still ask that.
Yeah, absolutely.
And he still does.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
So then being in a church and just doing the altar call. And I remember, many times, just sit right down here. And it was a great church off Middlebrook Pike. I think the pastor's name is Sam. Great man. I still remember, his sermons and demeanor. So the biggest thing he said, at the end, the Baptist thing, come on up if you ever wanted to, give your life to Christ, now's the time, that the organ playing and all that stuff.
Yeah.
And I remember thinking, I'm going to go do this. And I really felt audibly heard, no, man, don't do this. We got this. And I almost felt like someone pushing me down going,
wow.
No. And it hit me. I was like, oh my goodness. So if there is a God, there is a Satan.
Yeah, absolutely.
Who else would want me to stay in this pew and not go, who's telling me that I don't need this? And that freaked me out. I was like, I'm in bondage and I don't know it.
That's freaky.
And I stood up and just whoosh, I felt just the wisp of just all that whatever had me in bondage. And I went forward.
Wow.
Yeah.
That is so cool. So when we come back, we're going to get into your producing days and kind of dive into the current Travis.
There you go.
Travis Wyrick with us on Dealing with Life. Glad to have you along. I'm Tom Baker, author of One Dog's Faith. It's a book about life, trust, and worry through the eyes of a dog. If you're a dog lover or you're a worrier, or a little bit of both, or a lot of both, I think you'll like it. It's available through onedogsfaith.com and or Amazon. We'll be back with more of Dealing with Life in just a minute.
If you got pain, he's a pain taker.
You're listening to a show called Dealing with Life. Really glad to have you along. I'm Tom Baker, author of One Dog's Faith, a book about faith, life, trust, and worry through the eyes of a dog. And with me in the studio today is Travis Wyrick.
I'm the dog today.
Roof. Travis is a multi-Dove award-winning, Grammy-nominated music producer with 30, count them, 30 number one hits with his name on them, and also world-class guitarist. And you work with artists such as P.O.D., Pillar, Toby Mac, Dolly Parton, Charlie Daniels, and that's only scratching the surface. My goodness.
It's kind of schizophrenic. Most people do just this or just that. I just love music. I like good music.
Well, obviously, word gets around because your reputation as an artist and as an engineer and as a producer is amazing, and people seek you, and that's really impressive.
Thank you.
what I want to talk about first, as we get into this part of your life, is you're using music and dealing with this dark industry we call the music business as a ministry.
Yeah, I think at first, when I first started recording and I got saved, I actually had a little kind of a conviction moment of, well, now, wait a minute, do I need to just record Christian music? And just kind of thinking, and it comes back to that, go to a church and build huge walls around it, not let people in. And I really struggled with it. I remember one day in particular having a band, and I kept looking, going, I need to cancel this band because they're not Christian, which hindsight just is weird for me to even say.
Yeah, but
I didn't get it. Yeah, I was new at it, and I didn't get it, thinking, I need to, make Christian music, and I'm saved now, and, But then I finally said, I'm going to record this band. Started doing it. First day we go to lunch, and the singer goes, hey, man, can I ride with you? Yeah, sure, we hop in. Soon as we get in the car and we're headed to eat, he goes, so, man, tell me, I knew your reputation. You were a partier, you were wild, you had a reputation, and then you got saved and got cleaned up. How did that happen? And I thought, oh my gosh, wow, this, it's
the door got
12
open.
o'clock, And I thought, wow, God is going to use my story because, I did have a bad reputation, good reputation, whatever you call it. It depends what angle
who
you're
you're talking to.
Yeah. So, and that was it, and man, I struggle with this and struggle with this. And I knew you did it, and maybe you could help me do it and get my life. And I thought, wow, this is where God's going to use this.
We all have pasts, and we all have things that we're not necessarily proud of.
Absolutely.
But God says, hey, I can do with that.
Yeah.
I can take that and make it great.
Well, our resume is what it is. And a lot of people, the devil loves to tell you, oh, you're not worthy. You do this. You're a cutter.
You'll never make it
you're
in that
bulimic.
church.
Yeah, you're this. You've had an affair. You've done. And he loves to tell you you're not worthy. But God will say, hey, look, there's no such thing as damaged goods. Let me use what you struggled with to help those who are struggling with it. And you found a way to cope, and you found a way of peace. And let me use you to find that avenue.
Yeah.
And that's where people struggle. The devil would love to tell you can't do anything. That's his favorite job.
Yeah, and people think they can't go to church or they can't be a Christian because they're not good enough. And the opposite is, Jesus said, I'll take you as you are.
Yeah.
And as you get to know me, you'll want to do this and feel better about yourself.
And I hear this one a lot, and it really makes me understand where people are is, oh, if God knew he would never X, Y, and Z, and I've done so. And I was like, hey, trust me. First off, God does know. Secondly, have you looked at the disciples' resume? I mean, they were murderers. They were,
But they saw Jesus and went, wait, there is a better way.
And here's something we went over the other day, because we all beat ourselves up for falling short. It's, hey, I wanted to do X, Y, and Z, and man, I just fall short, or I doubted, or this, that, and the other. And I told someone the other day, I said, hey, the disciples were hanging out with Jesus, and they still blew it. We're talking right in front of him,
and he just
relevant
shook his
to
head
time.
and said, we need to try this again,
Sinking
boys.
it's like, hey, so don't feel bad when we're not living up to, these standards we've put on ourselves. Is even the disciples, would totally miss the mark.
Sure. So one thing I tell people that I talk to a lot is, if you've been through a devastating thing, if you've been through something that's really difficult, God has the ability, if you choose to take the path of taking a devastation and turning it into a blessing. And the reason I'm setting it up that way is because I know you, just like me, you've been through a very difficult divorce.
Correct, yes.
And that's painful, and that's really hard to live with and deal with, especially you have 4 children. And
3 children. I'm the 4th children.
Oh, that's right. I have 4 children.
I'm called the 4th child.
Yes. And
maybe that's why I got divorced. I don't know.
But you've been able to take that and turn it into a blessing. In fact, that's something you're really passionate about now, is talking to other people.
Yeah, went through a really bad divorce, was married for almost 20 years, and just a lot of dark circumstances, a lot of issues that happened, I won't go into to protect the children and stuff, but just a lot of really difficult things. And, the marriage didn't survive. And so, hands down, the hardest thing I'd ever dealt with. My mom died of cancer when I was young. My dad, left when I was young. A lot of these things, these are unfortunate circumstances.
Painful images, too.
Correct. But divorce is a choice. So I think that one probably hurt the most as far as just, the way everything went down. It was just...
Somebody wanted to leave you.
Absolutely. And just the damage and everything that went with it, you just sit there and go, man, that's heavy. But, as God will use it, I actually have had many people come up to me and have this, hey, man, I know you went through a really bad divorce. And, social media, love it or hate it.
Right.
Man, you just, and hanging out with you, you just seem to have risen above. And first off, I've always joked, I can have fun in a paper bag. I'm just that guy. I don't need much. I mean, I always, I work very hard, but I play even harder. That's just my mindset. And so, definitely the hardest thing I've ever gone through was the divorce. But even now, being on the outside, I'm remarried, have an amazing wife. She loves my kids. My kids are in a great place.
Yeah, you have that smile again.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And so, now I'm God's putting people in my life of, hey, man, let me tell you my story. And sometimes I can even go, hey, man, that's bad, but let me one up you, and so it puts them at ease of, wow, you're not in chaos.
Yeah.
And I would even say I was, but God heals. And the one thing through that divorce, I never questioned God. And I'm happy about that, because I remember even saying, we praise God and life was great. And I said, will we praise him when the storm comes? Because it's coming. It's always coming. It's
Absolutely.
always coming. And we didn't survive the storm. But I do praise him. I did praise him during the storm, even in the chaos.
It's a hard thing to do.
Absolutely. And it wasn't God's fault, and people will sit there and blame God, but I don't. It's just not,
I think
not
he
the way
saw
I think.
it, but
Yes.
but he also, what he also sees is when others are struggling and others are dealing with issues, the first person they're going to actually listen to is somebody who's been there.
Absolutely. And I'll even have, my old church used to call me and go, hey, we got a kid we need you to talk to, because he won't listen to us at all. We've all grew up in, missionary school and seminary school, never even seen alcohol and drugs. And, so he's going to roll his eyes at us. Would you talk to it's like, hey, yay.
Well, some people will be offended by that.
Yeah.
And
I think it's funny.
You not only think it's funny, but you embrace it.
Yeah.
And you take it seriously, and you can offer something like, wow, he's talking to me.
Yeah.
Yeah. But you've been on the other side, and you see the magic of actually seeing what Jesus talked about is, I love you. I don't care where you've been. I don't care what you've done. I love you.
Yeah, unconditional forgiveness, it's not like he's going to hang anything. Well, I do love you, but it's not how he works. I mean, y'all know that, but but either people that are struggling or the devil's got them is they think like that. Well, God, he's not going to like this or that. It's like, well, of course he doesn't. But he wants to help. He wants to love you through this.
Yeah,
There's no question.
He wants you. He wants your heart, no matter what.
He wants you to get through it. He doesn't want you to live in that.
Yeah.
You can't just sit there and revisit your dark place. You've got to move on.
Yeah. Yeah, and the devil's very good at making you want to revisit. We have just a little bit of time left after the next break, and we'll talk a little more with the man, Travis Wyrick. This is Dealing with Life. I'm Tom Baker, author of One Dog's Faith. We'll talk again in a minute.
Get up, get back on your feet. You're the one they can't beat, and you know it. Come on. I do believe I'm feeling stronger every day.
You're listening to Dealing with Life. We're really glad you're along with us. I'm Tom Baker, author of One Dog's Faith. In the studio with me is multi-Dove Award winner Travis Wyrick, Grammy nominated. Man, we could spend half the show just talking
Landscaper.
about.
I love to landscape.
Yeah, right. But what you've done for the last good while is a music producer. And you've worked with artists such as Nailed and POD and Disciple and artists such as Toby Mac and Charlie Daniels and Dolly Parton. And that's an odd world. You started as a touring musician. We talked about that earlier, and we're not a Christian. What to you was the turning point?
I would say the turning point was going back to where I first started recording bands. Some of the bands I recorded were Christian bands.
Okay.
And one of the reasons they came to me was because Christian music, especially at that time, people that recorded it sounded different. They really didn't have that secular, edgy thing. It was kind of most people that liked, it was weird.
It was vanilla.
Yes. And most people that liked secular music didn't like Christian music because it had that sound.
Yeah.
So some of these bands, I think, wanted me to do their records because I didn't understand that sound because I had never heard Christian music.
Okay.
So the band Disciple, that was the biggest thing. They were like, Travis, we want that sound you're doing. And again, I didn't know what a Christian
Well, you came from
sound
the rock
was.
world.
Yes.
Yeah.
I grew up on Zeppelin, Aerosmith,
Yeah.
all the, harder rock bands and such. So I ended up doing their record, and they were Christian and it's a ministry. They're the real deal. They're phenomenal. Still going strong.
Yeah.
And I think, maybe over 16 number ones. I don't even know. I mean, it's just, they've been doing it forever. But at the time, they were just a bunch of kids that literally would sell donuts door to door to pay me, with a big wad of cash. And we were, my studio was a little room in the house, and it was just kind of, it was just
start down.
experimental piddling with it.
But you had an ear.
Correct. Yeah, and I knew how to make an album. I knew how to make things work. So these guys, I just never seen that. They prayed with me before, and do you mind if we pray? They were very respectful, covered in tattoos, long hair, and I had never seen that.
Okay.
The only Christians, for the most part, I'd seen, not to be mean, but I'm going to be mean for 2 seconds, is I would go to a church, and people would look at me like they didn't want me there. I had the long hair. I didn't fit their demographic
What's he
of Christians.
doing here?
I know, absolutely.
Yeah.
And so at that point, you just get the eye roll of, oh man, Christians are tough,
Yeah. Well, a lot of people say hypocrite.
Well, and I joke, the hardest thing about Christianity as a pitch are Christians. Other than that, it's so obvious.
Well, but we are. Christians are human, but man, there's some that really turn other people off to it.
And you'll hear them on talk shows, and you're like, oh no, don't say that.
Yeah.
So it's finding that just love, and these guys were just amazing, and I'd never been around that. And I just remember walking away feeling something like, wow, whatever that is. Now I'm very interested in that.
Yeah, yeah.
And that's what they do. And and in hindsight, they're still going strong. I mean, 25 years later, I don't even know. I mean, probably 25 years later.
What's inviting to, what is it about Jesus that everybody loves? Love.
Yes.
And acceptance. And
Yep.
and I want you to be the best you can be.
Yep.
And I can help you.
And
That's
a lot
what
of their
Jesus
songs,
is all about.
Yeah, and a lot of their songs were about dealing with the chaos and the turmoil. And I've had some of my Christian bands. She was a cutter, so her, a lot of her stuff, she wants to reach those cutters. He did this, he did that. Everybody tends, there's Christian bands, but then there's ministries.
Yeah.
The ministries, they're like, Travis, we want to be in these venues because we feel like God has us looking for these people. And God will work out the details, but most of those bands go into it with a concept, and that's Disciple. They'd come off a tour going, wow, we had 800 people come to Christ on that tour.
It wasn't
a little tour.
It wasn't we had all these cheering people and they loved us because of our music.
Yeah.
They were there for the mission.
And they do signatures. They keep up. I mean, it's the real deal.
That's
You sign
awesome.
a thing, and they keep up with you. He does Bible studies online. Real ministry, real good stuff.
I really appreciate you being here.
Thank you so much for
being
having me. It's
so
a
open
pleasure.
and really exposing your life. It's been such an inspiration to me to watch you and to see the work that you do. And I just want to say, God bless you.
Thank you so much. Thank you. And remember, as he said earlier, we were the ones that got them together.
You were. If you didn't hear before, Travis introduced my wife and me on a blind date, and 20 years ago.
I should have stopped there. Yeah.
But I appreciate that, and
Absolutely.
it's been such a blessing.
Thank you so much for having me.
This has been Dealing with Life. I'm Tom Baker, author of One Dog's Faith. This is a show that airs every week at this time. The goal is to help you see that other people deal with struggles. You are not alone. But the good news is there is victory within grasp. Grab onto Jesus through his strength, which is more powerful than anything. You will have strength, and you can get through it. May God turn your battles into blessings.
It's been